Chapter 44-23. Huan looked down and didn't say anything. Hence, Qin Chen knew that it was impossible. Huan hated Qin Mo in his heart. Actually, if she were Huan, she would hate him too. On the day of her miscarriage, Qin Mo wanted to create a scandal. Moreover, Qin Chen knew that Qin Mo didn't have any feelings for Su Huan, but it didn't mean that he didn't have any thoughts about her. At the very least, she would be his future wife. If Huan didn't have a chance. If Huan didn't get pregnant and miscarry, Qin Mo and Huan would probably be the same. However, there were always accidents. This accident was Huan's pregnancy and miscarriage. At this moment, Qin Chen felt that Qin Mo was more flustered and distressed. However, Huan might not be able to understand his feelings. Qin Mo probably didn't want to express it. Even if her sister expressed it, Huan wouldn't be able to bear it. She sighed and said, Huan, maybe your personalities are too similar. That's why you often hurt each other. But believe me, in this world, no one will love you more than Qin Mo. He's just afraid of losing you. Qin Chen paused and lowered his voice. Or maybe you didn't give him a sense of security. Huan, men need a sense of security sometimes. Huan raised her head. It's impossible for me and him. Qin Chen sighed. He could only say that Huan was too young. Which of the things that Qin Mo wanted to do that he didn't accomplish? Her voice became gentle. Rest now. Your body can't be tortured anymore. Stay in the hospital for at least a week. Huan still wanted to say something, but Qin Chen pressed on her. Listen to me. As she said that, she took the blood report from the side. Your body is very weak, and your blood is very precious. Huan, you know what I mean. Huan leaned against the headboard. Her body was a little weak. At this moment, she felt that there was nothing she could do. She could only wait. After Qin Chen made arrangements for Huan, she immediately went back to her office after Huan fell asleep. After thinking for a while, she called Qin Mo, where are you? Abroad. Qin Mo was a man of few words. Qin Chen wasn't very polite to him. Then do you know that Huan is sick? Qin Mo's voice suddenly lowered a few degrees. What happened to her? I thought you didn't care about her and only wanted to suppress the He family and wrong you, or give Huan away. Qin Chen said sarcastically. In fact, she also thought that Qin Mo had gone too far. Since he liked her, he should have pursued her properly and loved her properly. Why did things have to turn out like this? Qin Mo's voice became a little hoarse. Get to the point. What happened to her? It's not a serious illness, but Qin Mo, you let a woman who just had a miscarriage follow you all over the world. Her heart is still broken, and her body is also injured. You also did so many things to her. Qin Chen said something fair. Qin Mo still didn't seem to be moved. After a while, he said in a low voice, it's good that she's fine. Qin Chen was a little stunned. After a while, he asked in a low voice, aren't you coming back to see her? She will come to me. Qin Mo said ruthlessly. Qin Chen had to restrain himself from cursing out loud. After a while, he said in a low voice, you'll regret it. Even if the He family falls, even if Rongyu has no future, even if you don't let Huan meet you, you know what kind of person Huan is. Brother, don't wait until the woman's heart turns cold. Chapter 44-24. Qin Chen didn't know what Qin Mo was thinking. He only knew that Qin Mo had no intention of coming back. Qin Chen was a little embarrassed. Was leaving a woman in the hospital really the right way to chase a woman? However, Qin Chen couldn't ask. This was probably what Qin Mo was sure about, so he was relieved. Being relieved didn't mean being at ease. President Qin, who was far away in a country, put down his phone and stood on the balcony of a banquet hall, looking at the night view outside. At this moment, the bustling knight was alarmed. It wasn't gentle, but a little sharp, just like his mood at the moment. Suilio walked to his side and handed him a glass of red wine. She said softly, "Is it about Director He?" Qin Emo just glanced at her, but he took the glass and drank slowly. He didn't say anything. He was even quieter than the night. Suilio was a little bitter. Qin Emo looked very lonely. She was here, and they were friends, and her family was better than He Huan's. She was just born a few years later, but they were separated. Why couldn't he forget He Huan? She felt bitter in her heart and comforted him softly, "Why don't we go back to B City?" Qin Emo still did not make a sound. He stood there quietly by himself. After a long time, he suddenly turned around and walked out with large strides. Suilio was still standing there, and she looked a little disappointed. It didn't feel good to be rejected by a man. Yes, rejection. Qin Emo had always rejected her advances, and she had wanted to give up many times, but she couldn't bear to before they made up. Qin Mo's private plane returned to B City that night, but when he returned, it was already 20 hours later in B City. He went to the hospital, and Qin Chen told him that He Huan had been discharged from the hospital. Qin Emo was silent for a long time. Qin Chen made a cup of coffee and handed it to him. Then, he said calmly, "In fact, her health is already very bad. She needs to rest. Stay in the hospital for a week, and then rest for half a year without worrying about anything." She paused for a moment and said with a serious expression, "Qin Emo, I have to tell you something. Prepare your thoughts." Qin Emo looked at her. Qin Chen lowered his eyes and said softly, "He Huan's body might not be suitable for pregnancy. Even if she gets pregnant, she won't be able to keep it. In the future, don't let her get pregnant." Qin Emo didn't say anything, but his fingers that were holding the coffee cup were a little pale. They couldn't have children. He had once thought about having another child, not for the sake of inheritance, but for the sake of when they loved each other the most. But now, it seemed to have failed. Qin Emo closed his eyes slightly, and after a long time, he said softly, "Is there no other way?" Qin Chen couldn't help but say, "Is this the point, Qin Emo? You should think about how He Huan can return to you first. You hurt her all over, and you still want to have a child." Qin Emo opened his eyes and looked at his sister. His eyes were filled with coldness. Qin Chen couldn't stand him anymore. She raised her hand and said, "I really admire you. Logically speaking, you and Big Brother like to raise children from young, but look at Big Brother. Cher is still a young girl, and He Huan is as pale as a ghost." Although she was beautiful, Qin Chen also felt sorry for her. After saying that, she glanced at her second brother's expression. Chapter 44-25. When Qin Emo left the hospital, he went to Rong Yu's place. Of course, he didn't go in. Instead, he looked out the window. Rong Yu already had Ai Meng Meng by his side. She was someone he was very familiar with. He didn't like or dislike her, but he was surprised by Rong Yu's choice. Rong Yu was good in all aspects. He should have a better choice. But when Qin Emo left, he caught a glimpse of Ai Meng Meng's side profile. She looked like He Huan. Thus, he understood why Rong Yu had chosen Ai Meng Meng. He paused but didn't say anything in the end. When he returned to King Entertainment, he stopped suppressing Rong Yu's studio. After making this decision, he stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looked down at his business empire. He had let Rong Yu off mainly for his own sake. Rong Yu and Ai Meng Meng were like another Qin Emo and He Huan. Just let them be together. Qin Emo let out a long sigh. Just then, Secretary He came in. President Qin. Qin Emo turned sideways. Secretary He came over and said helplessly, the company's revenue increased by 10% this quarter. She knew that this wasn't good news for Qin Emo. President Qin didn't lack money. He lacked women. Love turns to hate, love turns to hate. This was exactly the case for this good-looking and rich man in front of her. Sure enough, CEO Qin was calm on the outside and on the inside. He just responded with a lazy and didn't say anything else. Secretary He bit the bullet and said, oh right, the shares of Director He's cultural company dropped yesterday. If this continues, the future is bleak. President Qin, do you really want to continue? Qin Emo looked at Secretary He quietly. After a long while, his Adam's apple moved slightly. Continue. Just don't let it go bankrupt. He wanted to continue until He Huan came to beg him. Actually, wealth wasn't important to the He family. He Huan had a lot of savings. But if it collapsed like this, mentally, he knew he had gone overboard, but he couldn't think of any other way. Everyone was well aware of this, especially his parents, who were very angry at his behavior. They said that he was crazy and did not care about the friendship between the two families. However, if he lost He Huan, what was the point of having a good relationship with her? Qin Emo admitted that he was crazy. Crazy for her. Secretary He stood at the side, stunned for a long time. Qin Emo asked her indifferently, do you know where He Huan is? She left the hospital. How is she now? Secretary He let out a long sigh. I've asked around. Director He has used her connections to finance her father's cultural company. The investment is estimated to be several billion, and Director He might also invest in it herself. She might even put her own studio under the He family's cultural company. Of course, Qin Emo understood He Huan's intention. She wanted to fight him to the end. He looked at Secretary He. You go out first. Secretary He stood where he was and looked hesitant. President Qin, isn't this too much? Too much. Qin Emo smiled bitterly. Do I have to watch her leave me? Secretary He didn't dare to ask any more and left first. Meanwhile, Qin Emo stood where he was and made a phone call. He Huan's year of hard work went down the drain. That night, the news of Don't Tell Her failing the censorship blew up on Weibo. It was the top 3 trending topics. Chapter 44-26. Of course, all the companies and investors related to the movie were done for, including the He family's cultural company. Qin Emo was a businessman and he knew how to take drastic measures. He Huan was easily beaten to the point where she couldn't fight back. But the consequences were severe. On the surface, King Entertainment's stock price even rose a lot, but Qin Emo wasn't happy. A week passed and He Huan didn't seem to have any intention of begging for mercy. Instead, he could see news of her on the gossip. Just as Qin Chen said, she was pale and frail. It made his heart ache. Qin Emo had a bad habit of sitting in his office and looking at He Huan's photo for the whole night. Sometimes he would go out for a walk. She was living in that apartment now and never called him. It seemed like she didn't care about Yi Huan anymore. Qin Mo's car was parked in front of her apartment. The lights in her apartment were off. He sat in the car and waited quietly until she came back. She didn't come back alone. Beside her, there was a bodyguard who drove her back. With an expensive limousine and an elegant man, Qin Emo could tell at a glance that he was a rising star in the legal world. He had a good family background and good looks. Now, he ran the most prestigious law firm in B City and was Yi Mulan's direct junior. He Huan's motive for being with him was obvious. Chin Mo sat in the car and watched them quietly. The car window was open and he was smoking. Of course, Huan could see him, but she pretended not to. She was very tired, so tired that she didn't have the energy to face him. She said goodbye to Bai Shualan and pulled on her jacket to go home. Lawyer Bai saw Chin Mo and went to greet him. The Bai surname was not bad, so Chin Mo had no reason to sit in the car. When he opened the door and got out, he glanced at Huan before responding to Bai Shualan. Lawyer Bai, long time no see. Yes, President Chin. I didn't expect to meet you here. Bai Shualan paused for a moment. But I might have to meet President Chin often in the future because I took on Ms. He's custody battle case. Chin Mo had already lost his patience. I'll leave it to my team of lawyers. As for my meeting with Lawyer Bai, I'll probably meet him as a man, right? He wasn't stupid. If it was a friend or work relationship, he would only ask his assistant to do it. He wouldn't be so gracious. It was obvious that this man wanted to pursue Huan. Now he knew what Chin Chen meant when he said that Huan didn't need a man at all times. Chin Mo just felt a little unlucky that she could find such a man in a lawsuit. Before one wave of rivals in love had subsided, another wave had arisen. Bai Shualan smiled slightly. President Chin is right. Men were very straightforward with their words, and this sentence almost admitted his intentions towards Huan. Chin Mo's expression would not be good. He stared at Bai Shualan, who didn't avoid it. Huan is a very cute girl. Chin Mo narrowed his eyes. She's in her early 30s. Oh, she's 3 years younger than me, Lawyer Bai said nonchalantly. He saw that Chin Mo was about to make a move, so he smiled and said that he would leave first. He didn't mind that Chin Mo was still there. A mature and confident man probably wouldn't mind this. They had been husband and wife before, so pursuing now was nothing. Chapter 44-27. After Bai Shualan left, Chin Mo stood there for a long time and smoked another cigarette. He raised his head and looked at Huan's apartment. The lights were still on. As long as the lights were on, he would not leave. He stood there for a long time. The winter night was cold, but he could not feel it. He only felt that his heart and lungs were warm. It was not a good feeling. It was painful. If he had a choice, he would rather give up. However, he could not give up now. So, to a certain extent, he hated her. And he hated himself. There was no turning back for Chin Mo, and he did not want to turn back. If it was painful, he would feel the pain until the end. Chin Mo stood downstairs for the whole night. Huan went out before 8:00 the next day. When she went downstairs, she saw Chin Mo's car. She hesitated for a moment but still went over. Chin Mo sat in the car and smoked as he looked at her. You still haven't given up. You want to fight for Huan in court. You know you can't win, but you still decided to marry that pretty boy lawyer to get a bigger bargaining chip. Huan's expression was ugly. She bit her lip and glared at the despicable man in front of her. Her voice was a little hoarse. Chin Mo, you're despicable. I believe you haven't seen how despicable I am. He put out the cigarette. I can't bear to do anything to you. Huan stood in the cold wind. Her whole body was trembling. She did not know if it was because she was angry or because of the cold. After a long time, her voice was as cold as ice. Then, thank you, President Chin, for being merciful on leaving me with some warmth. Now, I thank you. As she said that, she turned around and left without looking back. She got into her car and drove away. Chin Mo sat there and lit another cigarette. Early that morning, Huan got into a car accident. It was not serious, but her hand was bruised. She needed to rest. The media made a big deal out of Suelio and Chin Mo for an entire day. Of course, Suelio, Chin Mo, and the others were also involved in the scandal. If Chin Mo did not say anything about public relations, no one would do it. In the evening, Chin Chen went to the ward. He looked at He Huan's bandaged hand and sighed. You'll have to stay in the hospital for at least half a month. He Huan, I'm not trying to scare you, but if you don't listen to me, your hand will have sequelae. He Huan lowered his head and said nothing. I'm serious. You can't go out anymore. I'll talk to Chin Mo about your family. He's like a mad dog now. Chin Chen couldn't stand it anymore. He Huan used to be so energetic and healthy. Although it was true that she was beautiful now, could she withstand a few more blows from Chin Mo? That was good enough. As Chin Chen spoke, he sighed again. Right at that moment, the ward door opened and Bai Shulan, the lawyer, came in. When he came over, He Huan naturally had to greet him. Since it was only her hand that was injured, it was no problem for her to get up. Thus, she went to the small living room to talk to him. Chin Chen stood there for a while, making sure that the woman with the surname Bai treated him as a man. Moreover, as He Huan's ex-sister-in-law, she could tell that Bai Shulan wanted to woo He Huan. She was too immoral. It was just a lawsuit, but she wanted to steal her brother's girlfriend. Chin Chen was wearing a white doctor's robe. She was 178 centimeters tall and looked elegant. Coupled with her short hair and androgynous facial features, it was easy for people to mistake her for a man. She walked over and placed her hands on He Huan's shoulders. She leaned forward as if she wanted to touch He Huan's hair and said in a low voice, "Didn't I tell you to rest more? Are you being disobedient again?" Chapter 44-28. He Huan was stunned. She tilted her body and looked up at Chin Chen. The relationship between them was indeed intimate, but it seemed to be different from usual. She was puzzled, but Lawyer Bai was even more surprised. This male doctor was very good-looking. He exuded a noble aura and didn't look like a doctor at all. He looked more like a male model. Moreover, he was very close to He Huan, so close that it felt like they were close. They didn't look like a doctor and patient, but more like a couple. Lawyer Bai had to admit that this doctor and He Huan looked very compatible, so he looked at He Huan. He Huan was also a little annoyed. She knew Chin Chen's personality, so she explained awkwardly, "This is Dr. Chin Chen. He's very famous in the country." Bai Shulan was even more surprised when she said that. Of course, she had heard of Chin Chen, the world's leading surgeon and also Chin Mo's sister. But the person in front of her was obviously a male doctor. Bai Shulan wasn't an idiot, so she quickly understood what the doctor was trying to do. She just smiled and maintained her composure. Then, she passed a bouquet of white roses to He Huan. "This is for the patient." Chin Chen raised his eyebrows. What a clever confession. But he probably didn't know that He Huan would be allergic when she was weak. Sure enough, He Huan sneezed after taking a sniff of the flowers. Tears came out and her nose turned red. It was a very ugly scene. Bai Shulan was still asked to leave by Dr. Chin on the grounds that he had hurt her patient. Of course, she knew how to deal with He Huan's problem. She helped her spray some medicine on her nose and casually teased, "He looks like a good man." If Chin Mo knew, he knew. He Huan leaned against the headboard and said softly. Chin Chen looked at He Huan and asked slowly, "What do you think?" He Huan looked down. "Nothing, I just want He Huan back and my parents to be safe." When she said this, Chin Chen sighed again. You should also know Chin Mo's temper. Since he has chosen to shed all pretense of cordiality, he will go all the way. You must be mentally prepared. Now, she couldn't even persuade He Huan. There was a feeling that Qin Mo had forced He Huan into a desperate situation, and Qin Mo was the one in front of him. Behind her was a bottomless abyss. Qin Chen could only take care of He Huan and accompany her to relieve her boredom. There was also good news. Rong Yu's condition had improved and he had been discharged. He just had to come back once a week for a checkup. By the way, he and Ai Meng are married. They seem to have a good relationship. Qin Chen sighed. They're already together. Isn't this world too fantastical? He Huan was stunned for a moment and then she looked down. It's good. Ai Meng is actually a very promising actress. Will you still use her if you have the chance? Qin Chen took it as a casual chat. He walked over and stretched out his hand to let He Huan lean on his shoulder. This was the strength of a boyfriend. The nurse was so envious that she cried. Indeed, Dr. Qin's shoulder only belonged to Director He. However, He Huan did look adorable. She was small, fair and fragile. The Qin siblings seemed to like her very much. In the nurse's mind, there was already a rich family drama. The main characters were He Huan and the second generation of the Qin family. Chapter 44-29. Hearing Qin Chen's question, He Huan tilted her head and looked at her strangely. After a long while, she said in a low voice, I don't even know if I can act anymore. She didn't know if she would have a chance. The storm this time was almost devastating. She wasn't so optimistic that the He family could get out of it unscathed. As his daughter, she would choose to advance and retreat together with him. Qin Chen stared at her eyes for a long while and asked her in a low voice, Do you hate Qin Mo? He Huan looked a little absent-minded, then she lowered her eyes and said, I don't know. How could Qin Chen not know? But because she loved him, she hated him. She couldn't say anything, so she told him that she had to go and help other patients. She was about to leave when He Huan stopped her, Don't tell Qin Mo that I'm here. Qin Chen had already walked to the door. He leaned to the side and turned his head. Then, he smiled meaningfully. He probably knows by now. After finding out that there was an adulterer and a husband, Qin Mo would pay attention to He Huan's movements from time to time. Yi Muyun and Qin Mo, these two brothers, had always fought together. They had never lost to anyone. It was just that their women were rather pitiful. After Qin Chen said that, He Huan's face turned pale again, but she didn't say anything else. Everything was quiet again. Qin Chen paused for a moment and then left. As soon as she returned to her office, she received a call from Qin Mo. She sighed and said, You know. Qin Mo nodded. Let me have dinner first. Is that all right? I haven't stopped working yet, Qin Chen couldn't help but say. Her phone remembered to bring you wonderful novels. However, as soon as she finished speaking, the door of her office was opened. Qin Mo walked in, followed by Qin Chen's secretary, the nurse, whose face was red. President Qin was so handsome. Dr. Qin is also handsome, but President Qin is different. Dr. Qin was like a handsome man in a manga, but President Qin's masculinity couldn't be hidden even through his clothes. The young nurse suppressed the desire to scream in her heart and closed the door for them in a reserved manner. Qin Chen is a little helpless. Is the entertainment industry going to close recently, Qin Mo? Is that why you come to your sister again and again? Qin Mo glanced at her and then looked at Qin Chen's lunch. It was so luxurious that it made him doubt his life. A doctor was so extravagant that he ate even better than the CEO of a company with a net worth of hundreds of billions. Everything was of the highest quality. This was not a working meal. This was clearly the most high-end Michelin cuisine. Looking at Qin Mo's eyes, Qin Chen smiled. Are you hungry? If you are, let's eat together. I'm afraid that you will drool. That will be ugly. After all, in addition to being the CEO of the entertainment industry, you are also a man who is going to be in his 40s. If you can't take care of your wife, eating a mouthful of food is nothing. Qin Mo smiled coldly. Qin Chen, when did you become so mean? Qin Chen smiled as he ate the food. You're the one who's mean to your ex-wife. Do you want me to tell you one by one? Qin Mo still stared at her. Qin Chen smiled. Looking at his second brother's thin appearance, his heart softened. He pulled him over. Eat a little. He Huan's hand is injured and can't run away. She has to stay in the hospital this month unless her hand doesn't want to recover. A month? Qin Mo looked at her. Qin Chen smiled. Half a month. A month is for you. Chapter 44:30. However, it would be New Year's Day in 20 days. It was inhumane to stay in the hospital. Qin Mo looked at his sister. Half a month. My mobile phone remembers to bring wonderful novels to you. He Huan immediately understood that Qin Mo knew about Lawyer Bai's visit. She chuckled. If she goes home, won't they be closer? Qin Mo's voice was slightly hoarse. She will only go to my place to recuperate. Are you sure and certain? Qin Chen looked at his honorable second brother with a smile. You're so confident. It just so happens that no one is taking care of He Huan now. Why don't you take care of her? Qin Mo was rendered speechless by her words and could only stare at his sister. Qin Chen smiled. Okay, let's eat. You seem to have lost a lot of weight recently. How are you going to pursue He Huan if you don't eat? Qin Mo glanced at her again. At least you have some conscience. As he spoke, he really did eat something. Qin Chen looked at him and said very slowly, second brother. Qin Chen rarely called him that. Qin Mo looked up. Qin Chen said very slowly, actually, even if Dad and Mom scolded you for being like this, I would still think that you're a mad dog. But we're family after all. Have you ever thought that if He Huan were to make up her mind, the two of you would really be finished? She used to love you, so it might be better if you pester her more. Qin Mo immediately lost his appetite. He glared at his sister. What are you thinking about every day? It's for your own good. Qin Chen rarely showed her girly side. She walked over and hugged her second brother from behind. She rested her face on his shoulder and softly said, Second brother, you must be happy. You must be well. Qin Mo's heart softened. Qin Chen rarely acted like this. As soon as he opened his mouth, his voice was slightly hoarse. What's wrong? Qin Chen closed his eyes. I'm worried about you. Qin Mo felt very upset. After a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, I'll be fine. I'm afraid that you'll be alone for the rest of your life. Qin Chen's voice was low and deep, and he sighed with emotion. It was also a little hateful. Qin Mo turned his head. He was a little angry at first, but when he saw the expression on Qin Chen's face. Qin Chen was really worried about him. He let out a long breath and said in a low voice, I won't. Qin Chen looked at him. Really? Qin Mo smiled and patted her face. Of course not. When Qin Chen wanted to move away, the chief of surgery happened to have a surgery to discuss with Qin Chen, so he came to discuss it. Unfortunately, there were a few assistant nurses behind him. As soon as the door was pushed open, they saw Qin Mo patting Qin Chen's face. Everyone knew that they were brother and sister, but Qin Chen's appearance was really very neutral, so the scene became indescribably classic. The deputy chief opened his mouth like a crocodile, and the young nurses behind him covered their faces and wanted to scream. This scene was really too fucking cute. Qin Chen heard the movement behind him and turned his head. Seeing their expressions, he knew what they were thinking. She couldn't help but roll her eyes. It was also a kind of trouble for people to be too good-looking. Seeing that she had something to do, Qin Mo didn't stay any longer. "I'll leave first. Don't you want to eat?" Qin Chen called him and sat down, holding his hand. Qin Mo's eyes darkened. "I'll go see He Huan." Qin Chen smiled and didn't say anything else. On the other side, Qin Mo went out and broke the hearts of the young nurses. Chapter 44-31. When Qin Mo walked out, he broke the hearts of all the young nurses. They also wanted to see the two handsome men together. Although Qin Chen was a woman, it didn't affect them from the perspective of appreciation. The young nurses were ready for the next scream. Qin Chen looked at the group of young nurses and could not help but roll his eyes again. Being too good-looking was really a kind of trouble. While she was discussing the surgery with the deputy chief physician, Qin Mo went to the ward. He Huan was still in the ward, and there were two specialized nurses taking care of her. He didn't go in immediately. Instead, he stood outside and watched her quietly. "My mobile phone remembers to bring wonderful novels to you." He Huan was also eating. She declined the nurse's offer to feed her and chose to eat with her left hand. Of course, it was very inconvenient for her to eat with her left hand, but she still insisted on eating with her left hand. Even though she ate very slowly, she still looked a little awkward. Sometimes, she would be lost in thought for a while. No one knew what she was thinking about. Qin Mo wondered if she would think of him when she was in a daze. But he smiled bitterly. Even if she wanted to, she would probably be gnashing her teeth in hatred. Qin Mo quietly watched for a while, then pushed the door open and went in. The nurses all knew him. Xingyuan was under Yi Muyun's name, and Dr. Qin was Qin Mo's sister. Who didn't know Qin Mo's name? When he came in, the nurse hesitated for a moment before leaving. He Huan looked up and saw that Qin Mo had closed the door. She stared at him blankly and put down the spoon in her hand. Her tone was extremely indifferent. "Why are you here?" Qin Mo walked towards her and said in a hoarse voice, "I heard that your hand was injured, so I came to have a look." "Thank you for your concern, President Qin. I think if President Qin had shown mercy, I wouldn't have had a car accident. Isn't it unnecessary for President Qin to come over now?" He Huan said coldly. Qin Mo had already walked to her side. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached for her set meal. To be honest, Qin Chen took good care of her. Whatever Qin Chen ate, He Huan ate too. "Look, very delicious." He Huan was a little wary when he took it from her. "What do you want?" Compared to her sharpness, Qin Mo seemed much gentler. He said hoarsely, "I'll feed you." He paused for a moment and said, "Don't force yourself if your hands are inconvenient. It's not embarrassing to let the nurse feed you." He Huan glared at him. "It's none of your business. I'll eat by myself." He maintained his original posture and looked at her quietly. Lu Xing culture probably won't be able to hold on for much longer. If you want to see it go bankrupt on the day you leave the hospital, I won't object. He Huan was still glaring at him. There was hurt and anger in her eyes. She had never known that a person could be so heartless to another person, to be so ruthless to such an extent. She didn't want to compromise, but the annoying truth told her that he would really do it. He Huan didn't eat immediately. She looked at him quietly. "Qin Mo, what on earth are you going to do?" He began to feed her and said calmly, "You know what I said I wanted." "Impossible." She looked down. Chin Mo, we're over. She couldn't accept the women who appeared from time to time. This time it was Suilio. Next time he was unhappy, who would be by his side? Ai Jia or another woman? Her voice was so low that it sounded like she was whispering, "Chin Mo, I don't want to go on like this anymore. Let me go and let yourself go, okay?" Chin Mo smiled gently. "But, who will let me go?" Chapter 44-32. After Chin Mo said that, there was a moment of silence in the air. After a long time, Huan finally said in a low voice, "No one won't let you go. It's you who won't let yourself go. Is that really the case?" Chin Mo's voice was a little cold. "Huan, is that what you think?" She said yes. There was a very subtle indifference in the air. Chin Mo's expression was not good, but he seemed to be suppressing something. However, he finally restrained himself and continued to feed her. Huan was unwilling, and his attitude was a little overbearing. Now that things had come to this, if Huan still compromised, she wouldn't be Huan. He was pressuring her, and he was almost unscrupulous. In the end, she couldn't take it anymore. After a few pestering, she couldn't take it anymore and smashed the bowl in his hand. There was a crisp sound, as if something had broken. It sounded like a bowl, but it didn't. It was the relationship between them that had broken. Chin Mo looked at the broken pieces on the ground and the precious ingredients on the ground. It was as if she had smashed his heart into pieces. Huan knew what he was thinking. There was a sneer in her eyes, and she said in a low voice, "Perhaps you think that this is a gift to me, but Chin Mo, I have never needed this kind of care. Save your care and warmth for other women. I will stand with my father. Even if the He family goes bankrupt, I will never compromise." Chin Mo was still looking at her. Huan's expression became even more terrible. "I can't accept this kind of love and affection from you." Chin Mo stared at the ground for a long time. Then, he slowly stood up and said very softly, "What if I insist on making you accept it?" Huan didn't want to talk to him. She closed her eyes and said, "That will depend on President Chin's ability." "Oh yes, if you insist on doing something, I will choose to get married to fight for custody of Huan." After she said that, Chin Mo's expression was quite terrible. He stared at her little face, not letting go of the subtle expressions on her face. He asked her word by word, "Do you really think that way?" Huan replied coldly, "Yes." Chin Mo smiled. His smile was very gentle. He even moved closer and said in a low and hoarse voice, "Then, whichever man you have an affair with, I will destroy him. I want to see how cold-hearted you are." Huan looked up at him. Yes, this was the Chin Mo she was familiar with. He used his power and money to control her. Whether she loved him or not, she had no choice. And she was also tired. She agreed and slowly lay down, as if she did not intend to continue talking to him. Chin Mo was still looking at her, and his voice became hoarser. "I'll make you beg me." He finally left. After Huan left, the young nurses finally dared to come over and clean up the debris in the ward. When they asked Huan if she wanted to eat something, Huan turned her back and said in a choked voice, "No, you guys can take it." The young nurses looked at each other and did not dare to say too much. However, they still told the matter to Chin. Dr. Chin drank her cup of coffee and sighed. "My second brother likes to force women. Isn't it good to coax women?" She thought about it and asked the nurse, "How is Huan?" "Miss, he is in a bad mood and does not want to talk," the nurse said softly. Chin nodded. "If I met such a pig head, would not want to talk either." It's just a meal. Is there a need to threaten other people's lives? Besides, it's not like he doesn't know He Huan's personality. Chapter 44-33. He Huan stayed in the hospital, and the news from the outside was getting worse and worse. It was very likely that Lushing culture was going to close down. Just thinking about it gave her a chill. She didn't understand why he needed to raise their relationship to the family. Kaim and Su Qing came to see her. She comforted her father, and Kaim was very open-minded. He Huan, as long as you make up your mind, Dad and Mom will always be on your side. He sighed again. Glory, splendor, wealth, and rank are just fleeting clouds. Your mother and I have long been indifferent to it. Pfft, as long as you are happy and safe. As for the things you don't want to do, don't do them. If you really can't do it, your mother and I will move to a small town. It won't be a problem for me to find a job to support our family. He Huan listened in a daze. Her heart was filled with mixed feelings. She looked up, and there was a trace of tears in her eyes. When she opened her mouth, her voice was also hoarse. Dad, I'm sorry for implicating you. At this age, she still had to suffer. He Huan wanted to be confident, but she knew that she couldn't protect herself. Of course, she could go abroad, but a Chinese director was suppressed in China. It was not hard to imagine what would happen in the future. He Huan didn't dare to be optimistic, and she couldn't be optimistic. She could only recover from her illness and fight against Qin Mo's custody. In fact, she knew that she couldn't win, but to a certain extent, she hoped to use this lawsuit to get something back. In her heart, she also knew that she had let Yi Huan down. It wasn't that she didn't want her, but that she couldn't get her. He Huan was silent. Su Qing sighed. What implicating? We are a family. Don't your father and I have the backbone to exchange you for glory, splendor, wealth, and rank? He Huan pursed her lips. Su Qing continued, it's just 3 meals a day. It's not a big deal even if it's just a simple meal. Besides, she had eaten in prison. Now that the family was together, there was nothing to be afraid of. With his parents' support, He Huan didn't say anything else. As a mother herself, Su Qing knew what He Huan was thinking. She thought for a moment and said in a low voice, Yi Huan, do your best. We'll support you. I know she's a sore spot for you. Now that you've fallen out with Qin Mo, if you can't get custody of Yi Huan, you won't be happy in the future. Mom, I know. He Huan's eyes were watery. I'll try my best. Su Qing came over and reached out to stroke her straight black hair. Her voice was very gentle. I hope that you can be happy. In the future, you will have the chance to find someone you like. Actually, how could she not know that it was very difficult? After the incident with Qin Mo, He Huan wouldn't be easily moved. Lawyer Bai was a good person, but He Huan's attitude was still rather cold. As parents, they had endless worries. On the other side, an unexpected person came to visit He Huan. He carefully pushed open the door of the ward and poked his head out. He Huan was alone with 2 nurses accompanying her. The moment she turned around, she saw Ai Meng Meng. She was a little surprised. Why are you here? Ai Meng Meng pursed her lips and looked even more cautious. I heard that you were injured, so I came to visit. He Huan nodded. Thank you. Because Ai Meng Meng had done something to He Huan previously, she couldn't let it go. He Huan smiled faintly. What's that in your hand? Is it for me? Chapter 44-34. Ai Meng Meng immediately said, this is the soup I made. It wasn't very good at first, but Rong Yu helped to make it taste better. I don't know if it's to your liking. He Huan smiled. I'll know after I try it, but I know that Rong Yu is a good cook. Ai Meng Meng was not so nervous anymore. She walked over and carefully took the soup and poured a small bowl. Seeing that He Huan's hands were not convenient, she said that she would feed it to her. Surprisingly, He Huan did not refuse and drank a bowl. It tastes good. He Huan smiled. I'll drink the rest tonight. Ai Meng Meng was excited, but she tried her best to suppress it. He Huan was calm. I heard that you and Rong Yu got married. I've been busy and haven't had time to buy a gift. No, you don't need it. Ai Mingming's face turned red. Director He, your blessing is the best gift. He Huan smiled again. Why are you so nervous? Ai Mingming's expression was unnatural. After a while, she said in a low voice, it's because my past was very bad. He Huan smiled. Since you said it's the past, then forget it. People have to look forward. It's not good to dwell on the past. Ai Meng Meng was stunned for a while before she said in a low voice, Director He is right. He Huan smiled. You and Rong Yu can call me He Huan from now on. Ai Mingming's lips moved and she nodded. He Huan smiled and did not say anything else. Ai Meng Meng was stunned for a while before she left. He Huan sat alone in the ward with nothing to do. She looked at the bowl of soup again. After thinking carefully, he called his assistant and asked her to pick a gift for him. It was not very expensive, about 100,000 yuan, and he sent it to Rong Yu and Ai Mingming's home. It was past 3 in the afternoon when He Huan's assistant came to deliver the gift. Rong Yu accepted it calmly and thanked him. After a while, he sent the guests away and gave the exquisite box to Ai Meng Meng. He Huan gave it to you. Take it. Ai Meng Meng was a little uneasy and hesitated. It's for us. Wedding gifts are usually things that girls like. It can't be for me, right? Rong Yu smiled and threw the gift into her hands. Open it. Ai Meng Meng looked at him again and carefully opened it. There was a box inside. It was quite exquisite. When he opened it, he saw a crystal set of the 12 zodiac animals. They were very beautiful and cute. It's very pretty. Ai Meng Meng liked it very much. She looked up at Rong Yu. I like it very much. I put it in my bedroom. There was a cabinet in their bedroom. Rong Yu had a collection of ornaments, and she could clean up a small space to put it in. After she finished speaking, she ran over. Rong Yu looked at her from behind with an indescribable look in his eyes. He followed her and saw that she had cleaned up a place and solemnly placed the 11 little crystal creatures there. It was a little out of place with some of the things he collected. It was even a little ridiculous. But he felt that it was very good. The truly good quality of a marriage and relationship is that there is no distinction between the parties. Where he was, there was a place for her. That was it. Ai Meng Meng put it away and turned her head. What do you think? Rong Yu looked at it and smiled. Very good. Chapter 44-35. Later on, he hugged her from behind. He didn't say a word and just rested his head on her shoulder. Ai Meng Meng bit her lip and said in a low voice, Rong Yu. Her voice was gentle, but there was also a hint of helplessness in it. She sounded like a young lady in love, but at the same time, she sounded as shy as a newlywed wife in ancient times. Rong Yu said softly, I just want to hug you. We're husband and wife, so hugging is normal, isn't it? She felt that it was, but she also felt that it wasn't. In short, they were a little flustered and at a loss as to what to do. After all, they had only been confused once. They had only known each other for a few days, and they knew nothing about each other. They did not understand each other at all. Meng Meng thought about it a lot, but Rongyu only repeated, Meng Meng, I'm your husband. Later on, he kissed her. She thought about the word husband vaguely as she was kissed. Later on, he fulfilled his duty as a husband. Actually, Meng Meng felt that it was a little unbelievable. Qin Chen appeared in He Huan's ward. She checked the condition of He Huan's hand. Then, she thought for a moment and coughed. How are you and Qin Mo? He Huan was stunned. Nothing. Qin Chen didn't say anything else and suggested, let's go take an X-ray. Although He Huan's hand was injured, Qin Chen still pushed her to take the X-ray, which made the nurses jealous. Dr. Qin Chen was the Prince Charming of the entire hospital. Usually, just a smile from him was enough to make them fall for him for an entire day, let alone pushing him like this. He Huan didn't feel that way. She had grown up in the Qin family and was used to the Qin siblings. After the X-ray was taken, there wasn't much of a problem. She just had to be careful not to drive or play the piano, and it was best not to do delicate or rough work. Qin Chen looked at his ex-sister-in-law and smiled faintly. You can be discharged, but you can't run around after you're discharged. I don't want you to have a more serious injury than the last time I treated you. He Huan bit her lower lip and said nothing in the end. Qin Chen sighed. He Huan, just bow down to my brother. You won't get the upper hand if you fight him head-on. He's completely crazy now. He Huan looked down. If I give in, will he let me and my parents go? Or can you return He Huan to me? Qin Chen sighed. Is it really impossible for you? Sitting in the wheelchair, He Huan stood up after a while. She smiled faintly and said, Qin Chen, do you know? In the past, I used to think that self-esteem wasn't that important. I just wanted to live the life that I got. But now, I can't back down anymore. I don't know how to live with him anymore. To him, I'm just someone he likes, not He Huan. Qin Chen played dumb. It's the same in between, right? He Huan looked at Qin Chen speechlessly. But she didn't explain. Anyway, Qin Chen would still pretend not to understand. In the end, Qin Chen helped her get discharged and sent her home personally. There was no one else who received such treatment. The expensive sports car slowly stopped in front of the apartment. It was a limited edition sports car, and there was only one in the entire B city. It was at Qin Chen's place. Qin Chen helped He Huan open the car door. As soon as He Huan got out of the car, she saw a Mulsan parked in front of her. Chapter 44-36. He Huan looked at Qin Chen. Qin Chen shrugged. It's just a coincidence. She wouldn't tell him that she had received 50 million yuan as a bribe, or He Huan would probably ignore her in the future. She coughed and said, I still have something to do at the hospital, so I'll be leaving first, He Huan. Remember to use your right hand less, and it's best to hire a nanny at home. He Huan pursed her lips and didn't say anything. Qin Chen felt guilty. It wasn't easy to accept 50 million yuan. In fact, it wasn't that she was greedy, she just hoped that they could reconcile, and that was it. Well, it definitely had nothing to do with greed. Qin Chen convinced herself. How could a handsome man like her feel guilty? She quickly got in the car and drove away. He Huan watched her leave and wanted to go back to her apartment. She really had a lot of things to do. Qin Mo got out of the car and stopped her. Let's talk. She looked up at the man in front of her, and after a long while, she said in a hoarse voice, What do you want to talk about? We can talk about Lushing culture, Yi Huan and us. Qin Mo lowered his head and said in a very gentle voice, which was a very humble attitude. If it were in the past, He Huan would have refused immediately, but He Huan thought of Qin Chen's words. She gently clenched her fingers, and then smiled at Qin Mo. Okay, let's talk. She entered the elevator first, and Qin Mo followed her. The two stood in the elevator in silence until the elevator door opened. His voice was a little hoarse. Open the door. He Huan swiped the key and led him into her apartment. The apartment was the same as before, nothing had changed, but it seemed a little lonely because no one had lived there for many days. Qin Mo went to the kitchen to pour a glass of water. When he turned back, He Huan was leaning on the sofa in a daze. He put the water beside her hand and sat opposite her. When the sofa sank, He Huan glanced at him and said softly, "What do you want to talk about?" "Come back to me," he said straightforwardly. He Huan was still leaning against the sofa. After a long time, she chuckled softly. She was a little absent-minded, but she slowly recovered. "Can you let go of my dad's company? Can you let my movie be released as scheduled? Can you let Yi Huan come back?" "Of course," he said firmly. "I can make it up to you." "Compensation?" He Huan chuckled softly. She seemed to be in a trance. She didn't say anything else. She just said that she was a little tired and wanted to rest for a while. However, while she was resting, Qin Mo did not intend to let her go. He quickly and quietly approached her. He Huan's back was facing him. "I'm very tired." Qin Mo seemed to sigh. He just trapped her under his body and kissed her for a while. When he kissed her, He Huan did not resist, but she did not respond to him either. However, this was enough for Qin Mo. She eventually fell asleep. Qin Mo got up to deal with some business. He still hadn't solved the crisis of Lu Xing and He Huan's movie, let alone Yi Huan. He was a businessman. He had to see He Huan's sincerity, if this was a business deal. When He Huan woke up, it was already nightfall. She called home without telling Qin Mo that she was with him. Then, she learned that the crisis was still there. When she hung up the phone, she was in a daze for a while. Of course, she knew what Qin Mo meant. It was a business deal. She had to show him some sincerity. He had always made full use of his advantages and never showed mercy. Chapter 44-37. Just as she was in a daze, Qin Mo pushed the door open and entered. He had already taken off his jacket and was wearing a pair of black casual pants and a beige sweater. He looked very comfortable and casual. He Huan was stunned again. She remembered that he didn't wear this before. However, she didn't ask. She just looked at him with a hint of wariness in her eyes. Qin Mo wasn't blind. Of course, he could tell. However, he quietly went over to open the curtains. It was already dusk outside. The street lights were on, and it looked very prosperous from here. Qin Mo stood there and turned to look at He Huan quietly. She had indeed lost weight again. Just like what Qin Chen said, she was very fragile and could arouse a man's desire to protect her. Did that Bai Shulan also see her like this, and that's why she was infatuated with a married woman, disregarding her identity? Qin Mo was a little angry, but he held it in and asked her calmly if she was hungry. He said that he had prepared dinner. He Huan still looked at him. "What are you trying to say?" He walked over and bent down to look at her quietly. Then he kissed her on the lips. "Let's eat. We'll talk about it after we're done eating. Or you can think about it. Didn't you make a phone call just now?" He Huan looked down. "How did you know?" "I know everything about you." He bent down and kissed her again. His voice was a little hoarse. "All right, get up and eat. you're too thin. He carried her out of the bed. The heater in the house was turned on, so it wasn't cold outside. Moreover, he had put a thick sweater on her. Juan was carried to the dining room outside. He placed her on a chair and she looked at the table full of dishes. There were 6 to 7 of them, and they were all nourishing dishes that she liked. She knew that he had put in a lot of effort into them. Chin Emo scooped a bowl of chicken soup for her and placed it in front of her. Jade bamboo chicken soup, your favorite. Juan looked up at him and said softly, actually, there's no need to cook so many dishes. Chin Emo smiled. It's rare for us to eat together. I'll take you to the villa tomorrow morning. There will be 2 specialized aunties to cook. Will Aunt Lon come? She asked. Chin Mo's ink-like eyes stared at her. After a while, he smiled faintly, I won't. It's just the 2 of us. I transferred the auntie here from somewhere else. She won't disturb us. Juan wasn't stupid. She knew that he was controlling and monitoring her in disguise. He had found his own people, but she didn't say anything. She just quietly drank her soup. Chin Mo's culinary skills were excellent, but he didn't cook often. Juan rejected him, but she didn't reject his cooking. She also knew that even if she ran around outside for 24 hours, it was not as good as 1 or 2 phone calls from Chin Mo, so she was safe here, waiting for him to make a move. She also knew that there was a price to pay, and that price was herself. Chin Mo looked at her quietly. He watched her finish the bowl of soup, then scooped a bowl of rice for her and prepared some vegetables. Eat more. Juan lowered her eyes and agreed. She pursed her lips and continued to eat the food in the bowl in silence. They were together. They had known each other since they were young. They had been husband and wife for so many years. They had so many intimate pasts, but now that they were together, they were like strangers, restricted, unfamiliar, uneasy, and nervous. It filled their surroundings. Chapter 44-38. When the meal was finally over, Chin Mo carried her back to the master bedroom and cleaned up. When he returned to the master bedroom, Juan was leaning against the headboard and watching TV. In fact, apart from her fractured hand, her body was even weaker. He looked at her for a while and said hoarsely, I'll wash up and sleep later. I'll probably be up at 11 o'clock. Juan's eyes were on the TV, but she said to him, I'll wait for you. Chin Mo's body trembled, and the color of his eyes deepened, darker than the night. He naturally knew what she meant. As a married couple, he couldn't help but move his Adam's apple uncontrollably, and his voice was hoarse. I'll be early. Juan's eyes were still on the TV, as if she was very focused, but if he looked closely, he would find that she was nervous. Chin Mo clenched his fingers, looked at her for a while, and then left. He went to the study, but he didn't deal with work immediately. Instead, he just sat there and smoked quietly. After smoking for a long time, he didn't let out a long breath until the cigarette box was empty. When did it become a deal between them? Chin Mo rubbed the cigarette box, sat there for a while, and then got up and walked out. As for work, it could go to hell. When he returned to the master bedroom, it was already past 10:30. He thought that Juan was asleep, but she wasn't. She was still watching TV, and it was actually a children's program. Why aren't you sleeping? He looked at the faint shadow under her eyes and asked hoarsely. Juan turned off the TV and looked up at him. Waiting for you. These 3 words crushed all of Chin Mo's self-control, and he couldn't even say ordinary words. After a long time, he finally found his voice. I'll go take a shower first. Juan sat quietly and watched him walk into the bathroom with a bathrobe. She listened to the sound of him taking a shower and the sound of the water flowing, After about 10 minutes, Chin Mo walked out, wearing a white bathrobe, and the ends of his black hair were dripping with water. He dried his hair and said casually, "You're ready to sleep." Afraid that she didn't understand, he added, "Sleep early if you're not feeling well." Hee-hwan stared at him for a long time before finally lying down. Chin Mo dried his hair, but he didn't go to bed immediately. Instead, he went outside to smoke a cigarette and drink a glass of red wine. When he came back, Hee-hwan was already asleep. His brows furrowed slightly. In fact, he knew that Hee-hwan was exhausted and she was just waiting for him. Or, waiting for him to make a decision. Chin Mo reached out and gently stroked her face. His voice was extremely hoarse. "Do you hate me that much? Are you afraid of me? Are you always so reluctant to be with me now? Do I have to use conditions to even touch you?" As he spoke, there was a hint of bitterness on his face. Finally, he slowly lay down. Lying beside her, he lay quietly for a while. Then he felt that her breathing seemed to quicken a little. He knew that she was awake, so he tilted his head. "Are you afraid of me?" "No." Hee-hwan's voice was low. "I'm not afraid of you." Chin Mo's voice was even more hoarse. "Put your head on my shoulder. I'll believe you." Hee-hwan bit her lip and finally put her head on his shoulder. Of course, it was a little stiff. Chin Mo's voice was a little hoarse. "Sleep." He didn't do anything to her. He just lay straight. He thought that he was actually angry. He was angry that she didn't love him anymore. Chapter 44-39. Chin Mo lay there quietly. He didn't say anything for a long time, nor did he fall asleep. As for Hee-hwan, her body was stiff as she slowly fell asleep. Chin Mo looked at her quietly. After a long time, he slowly closed his eyes. He couldn't fall asleep, but his breathing became calmer with her by his side. Eventually, he fell asleep unknowingly. After that, he had a dream. He dreamed of many things. They were all about him and Hee-hwan when they were young, and what happened on their wedding night. Later, Chin Mo woke up. When he woke up, it was a winter night. Hee-hwan was sleeping soundly beside him. He looked at her face quietly. Later, he couldn't fall asleep, so he got up, put on a bathrobe, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window outside. Through the window, he saw the gentle snow falling from the night sky. The snowflakes fell on the window, and the shape of the snowflakes was especially beautiful. He looked at it quietly. After a long time, he reached out a finger and touched it gently. Through the layer of glass, the snowflakes melted. He thought that perhaps he should wake Hee-hwan up to look at the snowflakes in the past. But now, he actually felt that it was nice to look at her alone. It was sad and beautiful. She was sleeping peacefully, not far from his side. Chin Mo stood there for about half an hour. When he returned to the bedroom, it was almost 4 o'clock. He lay down. Because his body was a little cold, Hee-hwan moved away instinctively. He waited for his body to warm up before pulling her into his arms. With his chin on her shoulder, Hee-hwan woke up. But she didn't make a sound. She just stayed in his arms obediently. After a long time, he finally spoke. His voice was low and hoarse. "Hee-hwan, can you feel the pain?" She didn't make a sound. She would lose if she did. She just leaned against him quietly and didn't say anything. After a long time, she fell asleep again. When she woke up in the morning, Chin Mo was no longer in bed. The curtains were open. The light was a little dazzling. Hee-hwan was startled. She almost jumped off the bed and ran to the window. Sure enough, it was snowing outside. It was white. She opened her eyes and looked outside. The snow was thick and it was still falling. There was a thick layer of fog on the glass. She reached out and wrote down Yi Huan's name. She thought of the little Yi Huan living alone. Just thinking about it made her throat feel blocked, and she felt indescribably uncomfortable. Her slender fingers wrote Qin Yi Huan's name over and over again. She realized that she missed Yi Huan so much. He missed her so much. Qin Emo stood at the door of the master bedroom and saw Yi Huan standing by the window in a daze. She was only wearing a thin nightgown. He took a nightgown and draped it over her. Then, he carried her and placed her on his feet. "Aren't you cold, standing like this?" he asked in a low voice. Yi Huan seemed to be stunned for a moment before she murmured, "Fortunately, it's snowing. It's midnight." He sighed softly. "I'll carry you back." He carried her to the living room. He turned on the heater and covered her with a woolen blanket. She could sit on the sofa and watch the snow outside. There was a cup of fruit tea beside her hand. Yi Huan's fingertips were warm. It was as if love and marriage were within reach. If she wanted to, she would be able to touch them immediately. But, she lowered her eyes. It wasn't that she didn't want to convince herself, but she couldn't. "What are you thinking about?" Qin Emo asked her in a low voice. Chapter 44-40. Yi Huan looked at the snow outside quietly. Qin Emo seemed to have gone for breakfast. After a while, the aroma of food wafted in the air. A warm house, snow outside the window, and a handsome man. All of this could be said to be a lifelong dream for ordinary women, but Yi Huan didn't think so. She was afraid. She was extremely afraid of Qin Emo. She didn't know what he was going to do next. She held the fruit tea in her hands and smelled the fragrance. It seemed that she could only calm down. He didn't hug her last night. She didn't know if it was because he wasn't satisfied with her. She had lost a lot of weight after the miscarriage. Her body was almost broken, and her face was as pale as a ghost. Men probably didn't have any feelings for her, right? If that was the case, why did he want to keep her by his side? Yi Huan couldn't understand. She thought that perhaps it was a man's possessiveness. She had been his wife, so he didn't want anyone else to touch her, not even a little. Or maybe he raised her at home. She didn't need to work or socialize, and he would raise a few women outside in the future. Was that what Qin Emo thought? Yi Huan was stunned. Qin Emo came over and his warm breath enveloped her. He wrapped his arms around her shoulders and lowered his head to kiss her hair. In a low voice, he asked, "What are you thinking about?" Yi Huan bit her lower lip and subconsciously asked him what was on his mind. Qin Mo's expression changed. He looked at her quietly and after a long time, he turned her face and kissed her. After the kiss, he reached out to carry her and walked to the master bedroom. 10,000 words were omitted. When she woke up again, it was already noon. Yi Huan opened her eyes. Qin Emo was already gone. She closed her eyes and thought about what had happened that morning. Of course, she wasn't reminiscing about it, but thinking about why he, just as she was thinking, Qin Emo walked in and bent down to kiss her. "Get up for lunch." She was too thin now and felt like a feather. But compared to before, each had their own taste. Of course, he wouldn't say that to her now. It would be too distant, and he was still angry. It was impossible for Yi Huan to pretend to be asleep. She sat up and stared blankly at Qin Emo. "I'll wait for you outside. Go wash your face." He kissed her cheek in a husky voice and walked straight out. Huan quietly watched his back for a long time before going to wash her face. What she found strange was that even though she had used up all her energy, her spirit was much better than before. The food he cooked was still very delicious. She ate a little too much, and even her pale face had a trace of color. After eating, Qin Mo carried her to the sofa to watch TV or watch the snow. Seeing that he took out his laptop and seemed to be dealing with work, Huan couldn't help but ask, "Don't you need to go to the company?" "I'll stay with you for the next few days, at least until the snow stops." He had already turned on the screen and said in a low voice, "Also, I wanted to use the helicopter to return to the villa, but the snow is too heavy. Let's stay here for a few days." More importantly, there was no one else here, just the two of them. Qin Mo quietly thought that they might be able to cultivate some feelings for each other. Huan replied with an "oh," and then didn't say anything else. She didn't want to watch TV, so she turned it off. In the quiet space, there was only the sound of Qin Mo typing on the keyboard. Chapter 44-41. After an unknown period of time, Qin Mo said, "I've made the call. Luxian culture has been restored. In addition, your movie will be screened on 214, and the number of seats will be around 40. After the new year, you can also promote it when you're well. However, I've arranged most of the things for you. You don't have to work too hard." He could even spend $1 billion in the box office for her and buy a few big prizes. If she wanted to make a name for herself or anything else, he could help her do it, no matter how she filmed it. After Qin Mo finished speaking, Huan was stunned for a moment before she thanked him softly. Qin Mo, on the other hand, smiled faintly and said, "No need for thanks." There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He had achieved his goal, and she was also gentle to him. Even this morning, she did not resist or reject him at all. However, there was something missing. Without love, there would be less hatred. In the past, Huan did not really care about him, but when they came back once a year, she was not like this. Now, her heart was more like still water. Qin Mo even had a trace of fear. He was afraid that they would never be able to return. After that, they did not say anything. It seemed that it would be useless to say anything. Huan did not call back to confirm because she knew that Qin Mo would do what she had done. After watching the snowy scenery for a while, she said that she was tired and wanted to sleep. Qin Mo carried her up and gently placed her on the soft bed. She was indeed exhausted, not just from this morning, but from the past few months. When she fell asleep, Qin Mo quietly watched her for a long time before he left to deal with his work. At about 4 o'clock, Huan's phone rang. Qin Mo took a look. It was a WeChat message from a lawyer with the surname Bai. It said that he was outside and was here to deliver a document. At the same time, he wanted to visit the patient who had just been discharged. Qin Mo used Huan's fingerprint to unlock the phone and replied, "I'll open the door for you." After sending the message, he set another alarm clock, just a minute later, and went outside. Outside, Bai Shulan brought a bunch of hyacinths to ensure that Huan would not be allergic. However, when the door opened, it was Qin Mo's face. Bai Shulan was surprised and shocked, so she was speechless for a long time. Compared to Lawyer Bai's shock, Qin Mo was gentlemanly. "Lawyer Bai, please come in." He turned to let the guest in and said lightly, "Huan just woke up from her afternoon nap. I'll call her out." At the same time, Huan's alarm successfully woke her up. She sat up and heard someone talking outside. When she took a closer look, she realized it was Lawyer Bai. Huan grabbed her hair and looked at her phone. Then, she realized that it was Lawyer Bai's voice. Not only did Qin Mo use her phone to peek at her messages, he even replied. More importantly, she was sleeping, and Bai Shualan came over. But no matter how angry she was, she had to go and meet the guest. Bai Shualan's work of work. He Huan put on her home clothes and went out. It was actually a little rude, but staying in the bedroom for too long was even more rude. When she went out, Bai Shualan looked at her. Qi Nemo turned back and said with a smile, "Go back and put on your slippers." He Huan looked down and realized that she didn't have shoes on her feet. She had forgotten. Biting her lower lip, she immediately ran back. When she came out again, the two men were sitting on the sofa and chatting. The atmosphere was harmonious. But He Huan knew that it was all an illusion. Chapter 44-42. He Huan walked over. Lawyer Bai. The location was different, the person was different, and the name was different too. In the past, she would occasionally call him Bai Shualan. Lawyer Bai looked at He Huan and smiled. "I'm here to deliver the indictment, but now, do you still need it?" He Huan sat down next to Qi Nemo. She picked up the indictment and read it for a while. There was a hint of confusion in her eyes. It was an expression that He Huan had not seen since she was young. When she was confused, Bai Shualan kept staring at her eyes, not letting go of any expression on her face. At this moment, Qi Nemo stood up gracefully. "I'm going to the study to take care of some business. You guys talk." The atmosphere was very strange. After all, the main character of the indictment was Qi Nemo. Now that the couple was living together again, he seemed a little unnecessary. At this moment, Qi Nemo left and the atmosphere was much more relaxed. He Huan poured him another cup of tea. Bai Shualan really liked her. After some thought, she asked, "Did you do it willingly?" He Huan smiled faintly. "I didn't have a choice." Perhaps Bai Shualan was a good choice, but she couldn't afford He Huan. She was like this now, and her family was like this. She was no longer the proud and willful little princess. Without Qi Nemo, she was nothing. Even if she could fly, Qi Nemo would end her freedom and break her wings. Perhaps she would never be able to fly again in this lifetime, but she was unwilling. However, she wouldn't tell Bai Shualan about this. She was just talking to him politely about business. It was not convenient to talk about personal matters. After the discussion, it was already dusk. Bai Shualan saw that it was getting late and it was time to leave. At this moment, Qi Nemo came out and sent him off with He Huan. The two of them stood together to send the guest off. It was a very strange scene. Lawyer Bai turned around and smiled. "Goodbye then." Qi Nemo casually placed his arm on He Huan's shoulder and smiled. "Goodbye, Lawyer Bai. And no matter what, thank you." This word was really mysterious. Bai Shualan didn't dare to accept it. After Lawyer Bai left, Qi Nemo closed the door and looked at He Huan. He Huan gently broke free from him and walked to the sofa. It had only been a short while, but she was already exhausted. Qi Nemo followed and kissed her cheek. "What are you thinking about?" "No." He Huan lowered her eyes, and her gaze fell on the indictment. She stared at it for a long time before she picked it up, walked into the study, and shredded it in the shredder. Qi Nemo was standing at the door. She knew he was there and looking at her, so she lowered her voice. "Are you relieved now?" Qi Nemo remained where he was and smiled faintly. "He Huan, why do I feel that the indictment is still in your heart?" "Whatever you think," she said quickly. After he finished speaking, he was in a daze. Qi Nemo walked in and stood in front of her. He reached out and pinched her chin, forcing her to look up. He Huan was unwilling at first, but he was so domineering that she was forced to look up. Let's remarry, He whispered in her ear and stared at her. Huan's body froze. You're not willing. His voice was cold. Huan looked down. No. Then let's go get our marriage certificate early tomorrow morning. He was calm and unyielding. Chapter 44-43. Huan's heart raced as she tilted her head to look at him. He hugged her from behind and his voice became much gentler. It's going to be New Year in a few days. Don't you want to see Huan? Huan's voice trembled. Is that a condition? Nemo didn't say anything, but his meaning was very obvious. It was a condition. Huan lowered her head and after a long time, she said yes in a low and hoarse voice. She only said one word, but this one word used up all of her strength and all of her emotions. When she turned her head again, there was a touch of moisture in her eyes. She looked at Nemo, the man she used to love very much. Nemo's eyes were like ink, and he also stared at her. Just for a moment, he seemed to be unable to bear it and kissed her. That night, Huan didn't sleep. She lay on the bed, and Nemo was next to her. He put one hand on her shoulder and consciously put her in the crook of his arm. If they were an ordinary couple, Huan would think that this would be a very loving sleeping position, but unfortunately, they were not. She turned her face sideways to look at his. Even in the dim light, it looked particularly handsome and threatening. He was almost 40 years old, but the Qin family had always been unique. Maybe it was because of Yi Liangqiu's good genes, but Qin Chen should be the best-looking one. If Qin Chen entered the entertainment industry, he would be the superstar of the century, an existence that could not be erased in the film industry. However, Qin Chen was only interested in the scalpel. Nemo was the most masculine one among all the children. Yi Muyun was more like a rich young master. He was a little gentle, but he was very violent and introverted. Huan looked at them quietly for a long time, then stretched out a finger and gently touched Nemo's face. He didn't wake up. Maybe he was also tired. They were all tired. Huan quietly left Nemo's arms, got off the bed, put on a coat, and walked to the bedroom window. The snow outside was very deep, but the sky was still drifting with heavy snowflakes, blowing towards her through the glass, melting on the layer of warm glass. Huan put his palm on the glass. It was cold, but the snowflakes were afraid. They were very much like her and Nemo. She stood there, her thin figure forming a faint reflection in the dim light. It was beautiful. Nemo woke up. He leaned against the headboard and looked at her quietly. He looked at her beautiful and fragile face. It was possible that she didn't belong to him. He quietly watched and watched, until a long time later, he got off the bed and carried her from behind. His voice was husky as he said, "All right, let's sleep." Huan froze for a moment. When she realized it was him, she softened her body and let him carry her back to sleep. But that night, she tossed and turned restlessly, unable to fall asleep. She couldn't sleep, and Nemo couldn't sleep well either. It was like they were consuming each other, consuming the night together. There was no winner or loser. The pain was the same. Nemo had enough of the pain of not getting what he wanted, but he didn't want to let go. Even if it was painful, he didn't want to let go. Because he didn't sleep well at night, he woke up later in the day. When Huan opened her eyes were very sore and her head hurt. The sky outside was bright, so it shouldn't be early. She lay quietly for a while. She turned her head and looked at Nemo, who was putting on his tie with his back to her. His back was slender and strong, just like his character. At this moment, he was very elegant and slow. He looked very serious, as if he had a lifetime to do this. Chapter 44-44. She didn't know if he was hesitant or conflicted about remarrying her. In fact, she couldn't figure out what he was feeling recently. Was it because he couldn't let her go, or because he didn't want her to be with someone else? Hehuan's voice was hoarse. Qin Mo, he slowed down and then suddenly sped up. He tied his tie and turned to face her. He grunted and looked at her. Hehuan bit her lower lip gently and sat up. Her eyes were on his face. She asked softly, "Have you thought about it?" Qin Mo's eyes were dark. He didn't answer her question directly. Instead, he walked over and kissed her. His voice was a little hoarse. "Get up. We'll get our marriage certificate in a while." After saying that, he walked out. Hehuan sat there in a daze for a long time. It was only after a long time that she felt an indescribable pain in her eyes. She finally took out her phone and dialed her mother's number. Today was the Lunar New Year. She thought she should talk to her mother. She didn't know why, but she missed her mother very, very much. It was as if she had to listen to her mother's voice to have the courage to do what was going to happen next. Yes, it was dangerous and a little crazy. But she had to do it. She had to protect everyone she wanted to protect. When the call went through, Su Cheng's voice sounded. "Huan, where are you?" The He family was in a mess because of the company. Su Cheng didn't know that Hehuan was in the hospital. She was also busy from morning to night. Hehuan's voice was a little soft. "Mom, I'm at home. How's the company?" "It's pretty good." Su Cheng breathed a sigh of relief. Everything is over. Although it was a big loss, the company was saved. Su Cheng paused as if she had thought of something. "I just saw the news. Your movie is going to be released in 214. Hehuan nodded. "Yes. I'll give the tickets to your father at the premiere." "Mom, don't you like Kong Chao the most?" "Kong Chao should be there." Su Cheng was silent for a while before she whispered, "Actually, my favorite celebrity is Qin Mo's mother." Now that the two families were at odds with each other, there was no going back. They used to be so close. Su Cheng thought that Hehuan shouldn't have married Qin Mo. That way, things wouldn't have turned out this way. She asked Hehuan to go home for dinner. Although it was snowing, at least the road was cleared. Hehuan nodded. "I'll go back tonight." After hanging up the phone, she let out a long sigh, as if she had completed some kind of mission. Finally, it was over. When she hung up the phone, Qin Mo happened to come in and looked at her silently. Hehuan dialed the number on her phone and smiled slightly. "My mom asked me to go back for dinner. Are you free, Qin Mo?" The color of his eyes changed. After a long time, he smiled. "Of course I'm free." He seemed to think for a moment. "After we get the certificate, we'll eat out. Come with me to the company in the afternoon, and we'll go back together at night, okay?" After some thought, he added, "You can sleep in my lounge." She compromised, and he finally seemed to have found his thoughtfulness. Hehuan's feelings were quite complicated. She smiled slightly and didn't say anything else. Hehuan got up and tidied herself up. She picked a relatively formal dress and ate breakfast with Qin Mo in silence. They traveled by helicopter because he said that he had an important meeting at 10 o'clock. Chapter 44-45. At 9 o'clock. The helicopter landed on a lawn somewhere. Qin Mo got off first and then hugged Hehuan. Hehuan was wearing a white down jacket with a large circle of fur around her collar, which made her face look even smaller and made it hard to tell her age. Chin Mo carried her all the way to the hall before putting her down. He reached out to take off her hat and thought for a moment. Take off your jacket later. It's still a little cold here. In fact, Hee-hwan was wearing a thick coat, while he was only wearing a woolen suit. However, he didn't seem to be cold and his hands were very warm. At this moment, he held her hand with his own and walked inside. The Civil Affairs Bureau was very quiet today. At first, Hee-hwan thought that it was because it was cold and snowy, so no one came out. However, she later found out that it was because the whole place had been cleared. Only she and Chin Mo were there in the morning. The process was the same as before, and Hee-hwan's mood was no different from the first time. It seemed that when they got married, it was not the time that she was willing, so she always missed it. During the photo shoot, the photographer was in a bit of a dilemma. After taking a few photos, he was not satisfied. In the end, he couldn't help but remind her, Mrs. Chin, you can lean over to Mr. Chin. Hee-hwan leaned over to Chin Mo. Fine, continue taking photos, but after a while, he was not satisfied. Mrs. Chin, you can smile. Yes, smile a little, but don't be stiff. Be natural. Hee-hwan tried hard to smile, but the corners of her mouth were not natural. In the end, Chin Mo hugged her and whispered in her ear, just think about Hee-hwan. Hee-hwan's heart palpitated for a moment, and then she finally smiled more naturally and successfully took the photos. After half an hour, Hee-hwan finally let out a sigh of relief. There was a hot marriage certificate in her hand, but it was taken away by Chin Mo. She looked at him. His voice was very calm. I'll take care of it. Hee-hwan bit her lip. Chin Mo smiled faintly. I'm afraid that you'll lose it. Hee-hwan still looked at him. He smiled again, reached for her coat, put it on for her, zipped it up, and put on her hat. Let's go. He gave her a deep look. This time, he was holding her hand as they left. Hee-hwan bit her lip and struggled a little. In return, he pinched her with dissatisfaction. She felt a little pain and did not dare to struggle again. Outside, Hee-hwan saw a dense crowd of reporters in the snow-covered land. As soon as she and Chin Mo came out, the reporters seemed to have smelled the scent of blood and started snapping photos crazily. Hee-hwan was stunned for a moment. Then, he turned his body and asked Chin Mo softly, did you call them here? Chin Mo didn't answer. He just put his hand on her shoulder and said with a smile, pay attention to your expression. Hee-hwan really wanted to retort at him, but she could only play along. She didn't want a new storm to sweep through the He family. She and her parents couldn't bear it anymore. Chin Mo was like the sun at high noon. No one knew how much power he had and how far he could stretch. Now, she could only play along with him. Hee-hwan smiled faintly, as if she was very happy, but she said to him, your meeting at 10 is a press conference, right? Are you going to announce the news of our remarriage? Chin Mo smiled faintly and looked very happy. You're getting smarter. Hee-hwan looked down and didn't say a word. She just clenched her fingers quietly. Chapter 44-46. Chin Mo only paused for a minute before he boarded the helicopter with Hee-hwan. Secretary, he was in charge of the aftermath. She had rushed over as well. Yeah, she had rushed over to deal with President Chin's love life. President Chin's passionate feelings for Director He were a little overwhelming. Passionate and high profile. She was a woman going through menopause. She was jealous. Secretary, he comforted the reporters. They could go to King Entertainment's press conference at 10 p.m. President Chin would explain in detail about his love life and marriage with Director He. Speaking of which, Secretary, he actually sympathized with He Huan. President Qin had cut off He Huan's escape route. In the past, they had a semi-secret marriage, and President Qin rarely showed his affection in front of the public. However, his remarriage this time was clearly very forceful. In the future, Director He and someone else. Oh, there would be no future. Secretary, he thought sympathetically as she got into the car. It was already 9:15 p.m. She had to rush back. She needed to take care of President Qin's love life. Asterisk at 9:40 p.m., Qin Mo's private helicopter slowly came to a stop in front of King Entertainment. On the first day of the Lunar New Year, the reporters were extremely busy rushing from east to west. However, to be able to chase such a big star meant that they would be settled at the end of the year. Who wouldn't be excited? Qin Mo carried He Huan down. He Huan couldn't resist, but she didn't want her face to be photographed either. Hence, she buried her face in Qin Mo's neck. But she didn't know that the more she did this, the more intimate and entertaining she looked. The reporters saw this scene. Ai Jia had no chance. Su Yi Lu had no chance. The original wife won. And she won effortlessly. President Qin's attitude said it all. Although he was domineering and overbearing, he was also a bootlicker. Qin Mo carried He Huan all the way to the elevator. She said that she wanted to come down. He lowered his head. We're already here. Let's go to my office. Even so, he still pulled her hat off and kissed it as if he couldn't help it. He Huan felt that he was possessed. They had clearly been together so many times, but he was still so passionate. She wanted to turn her face away, but after thinking about the consequences, she gave up and let him kiss her. Good girl. Qin Mo kissed her lips in satisfaction and smiled. He looked really good when he smiled, especially when he was relaxed and happy. He Huan froze for 2 seconds before murmuring, "What do you think I am now?" "Your personal pet." "Wife." He was still smiling. "What do you think I am?" He Huan had her own stubbornness. She could not bring herself to say the word husband at this moment, so she remained silent. Qin Mo did not let her off. He smiled faintly. "Can't say it out loud." Seeing that He Huan was still silent, he chuckled. "If you can't say it out loud, I don't mind staying in the lounge with you for a while." The reporters might have some room for imagination. He Huan couldn't take it anymore. "Qin Mo, must you be so despicable and overbearing?" Qin Mo just looked at her with a deep gaze. He Huan thought that he would get angry, but he didn't. He just looked at her and chuckled. "I prefer you like this." With just one sentence, He Huan's anger dissipated. If she continued to be angry with him, it would make her seem petty. Therefore, she didn't say anything because she didn't want him to get what he wanted. Didn't he say that he liked her like this? Chapter 44-47. Qin Mo understood He Huan's thoughts. After a long time, he lowered his head and murmured, "You look cute now." He even kissed her. He Huan stared at him. His voice became huskier. "Start over, huh?" He Huan couldn't help but ask, "Can't you keep a low profile?" "No." His tone became dangerous and forceful again. He Huan looked down. "Is that one of the conditions?" Qin Mo didn't answer her question because the elevator had reached the top floor. He carried her into the lounge and took off her coat. He reached out and touched her black hair. "Sleep for a while." "I can't sleep. I want to sit outside," He Huan answered quickly and slid down. Qin Mo looked at her silently and smiled. "That's fine too." He Huan walked out and lay on the sofa in the lounge area of the office, looking at the snow outside. It was a different world from the 68th floor. It seemed to be snowing outside. Don't look at it for too long, it will hurt your eyes, Chin Mo came over and whispered in her ear. I'll ask Secretary Tu to bring you some hot fruit tea. He Huan liked it recently. Maybe she was feeling bitter and needed some sweetness. After he finished speaking, He Huan just nodded her head lightly and replied, Chin Mo couldn't help but say, He Huan, can you? He wanted to say something, but his pride didn't allow him to say it, so he took it back. He Huan didn't care. In fact, she knew what he wanted to say. Since he didn't say it, she would pretend that she didn't know. Chin Mo was silent for a while. Then he smiled faintly and reached out to stroke her hair. After he went out, there was a temporary silence in the spacious office. He Huan was immersed in such silence. She just looked outside, quietly watching the snowflakes. Secretary Tu came in. The office was quiet. She put the things on the coffee table and coughed. Mrs. Chin, President Chin asked me to bring you fruit tea. It's your favorite flavor. The secretary's heart fluttered. Sure enough, she was Mrs. Chin again. He Huan was still lying on the ground. He said softly, Call me He Huan. The second secretary blinked. She didn't want to be called Mrs. Chin, did she? In fact, everyone knew about the incident with flourishing culture. President Chin had spent so much effort just to force He Huan to turn back. He had put in a lot of effort. The second secretary let out a long sigh. In this world, it was not to say that the people involved who felt good would enjoy themselves. Perhaps this kind of love was a kind of restraint, a kind of imprisonment. She looked at He Huan, and the smile on her face disappeared. The past was different. The second secretary heaved a long sigh. It was not easy to be a woman of a rich family. She didn't dare to say more, so she left and closed the door again. On the other hand, He Huan was still lying there quietly, looking outside. It was like being locked in a tower, with no freedom. She knew that after the promotion, she would lose her freedom. From now on, she would be Mrs. Chin, and fewer people would call her He Huan. As for Director He, it was just a dream of hers. She lowered her eyelashes, and a teardrop stuck to her long eyelashes. She tried hard not to let it fall. Her surname was He, but she grew up by Chin Mo's side. She couldn't even choose whether she loved him or not. Chapter 44-48. In an instant, she and Chin Mo took over all the mainstream media, including AI Jia and Suilio. But King Entertainment didn't seem to have any intention of doing PR, so they just went with the flow. He Huan scrolled through her phone for a while. She didn't feel like watching anymore. Chin Mo just wanted to show what he was willing to show to the public. And to her, she just wanted to get out of her current predicament. That was it. He Huan closed her eyes and placed her palms on the glass, listening to the sound of the snow melting. This was what Chin Mo saw when he came back. Outside the French windows, it was a world of ice and snow. In the warm room, He Huan was wearing a light yellow sweater. Her black hair fell over her shoulders. She looked small and slim from the back. As the CEO of King Entertainment, Chin Mo was used to seeing beautiful women. But for some reason, his taste in beauty followed He Huan's. In the past, she was healthy and sunny, so he liked her. Now that she was fragile and slender, he liked her fragile and slender. Chin Mo rubbed his forehead with his hand and smiled bitterly. He liked her so much, but He Huan only felt that it was a burden. He walked over slowly and held her shoulders from behind. His handsome face rested on her petite shoulders. What are you thinking about? He Huan was startled. Then she asked him softly, is the meeting over? He grunted nonchalantly, as if he didn't want to ruin the atmosphere. He continued to hold her with one arm and look at the snowy scenery outside. He Huan didn't push him away because she couldn't. She just looked outside and leaned passively in his arms. After a long while, he asked her in a low voice, are you going home tonight? He Huan nodded but didn't answer him. Qin Mo kissed her. I'll go home with you. Then he wrapped his arms around her and looked outside with her. It was a beautiful scene. At least, that was what secretary he saw when he opened the door. It was beautiful. He Huan's slender body was embedded in President Qin's tall body. It was very harmonious. Secretary he heaved a sigh of relief. It was finally harmonious. She left quietly to give President Qin some time. However, when she returned to the secretary's office, Secretary 2, Secretary 3, and a few other assistants were discussing President Qin's love life. Secretary he felt that it was getting more and more out of hand, so he reprimanded them. However, she was a very easygoing superior, so the little secretaries were still smiling mischievously and even asked her questions. Secretary he had no choice but to glance at them and say, don't be fooled by President Qin's domineering ways. He will eventually fall into He Huan's hands. Thinking about the scene just now, it was very beautiful. President Qin was like a loyal dog. However, sometimes a loyal dog and a licking dog could be equated. Secretary he thought about it and laughed, but it was just a laugh. At 5 in the afternoon, Qin Mo got off work on time and went downstairs with He Huan. Since the special elevator was under repair, he took the normal elevator. Originally, there were only him and He Huan, but when they reached the 32nd floor, there were more people. There were about 5 or 6 of them. Because they were in the same elevator as President Qin, no one dared to make a sound. The atmosphere was a little tense. Just then, Qin Mo spoke to He Huan, stop the car on the first floor. It's cold outside. Zip up and put on your hat. Although he said that, he still helped her zip up and put on her hat. He even put on her gloves and mask. After that, only He Huan's eyes were exposed. She looked at him with an indescribable gaze. Chapter 44-49. Qin Mo smiled. It's not cold now. Other than them, the other 4 or 5 people felt a chill down their spines. What a display of affection. Su Ilio was among them. She was embarrassed. Qin Mo did not seem to notice her. He only had eyes for He Huan. Of course, He Huan knew about Su Ilio, but she did not care. She did not even care about Qin Mo, so why would she care about Su Ilio? However, she could not forget that she had a miscarriage when Qin Mo and Su Ilio were having an intimate moment. That was probably why she did not greet Su Ilio when she saw her. She did not even bother to be polite. Hence, Su Ilio was in the same elevator, which made her feel awkward. The others looked at her with a meaningful gaze. Her eyes were watery. She could not help but look at Qin Mo, but Qin Mo only had eyes for He Huan. In the past, Su Ilio was quite confident. She came from a good family, better than He Huan. Moreover, she was a gentle beauty. However, He Huan looked even more delicate than her now. It was the kind of feeling that made men want to cherish her. Wasn't Qin Mo like that now? Su Ilio had a lot of inner drama. However, it was just a one-man show. The elevator opened and Qin Mo left with He Huan. Su Ilio stood there and felt melancholy for a while, in the car park. Qin Mo opened the car door for He Huan to get in. He had driven the car himself. Fortunately, the snow on the road had been cleared. It was still his Bentley Mulsanne, the car that he usually drove. Hee-Hwan sat in the car and took off her coat, gloves, and mask. Chin Mo closed the car door and looked sideways. I should have asked Secretary He to prepare a cup of hot fruit tea for you. It's too cold. She was too thin now. He was worried that she would freeze to death if she wore less. In the past, Hee-Hwan would never wear long johns no matter how cold the weather was. She would only wear a thin sweater and jacket, and her cheeks would always have a healthy blush. But now, this fragile and delicate little thing, even though he couldn't bear to part with her, he didn't dare to cross the line. Other than that morning, he had been restraining and enduring. He thought he should fatten her up a little. Otherwise, he would have to restrain himself for fear of crushing her. Chin Mo's Adam's apple bobbed uncontrollably as he imagined it. He glanced at her again before starting the car. He did not go to the He family's house directly. Instead, he went to the shopping mall and brought Hee-Hwan to a store. He picked up a set of expensive cups and looked up at Hee-Hwan. What do you think of this set? Hee-Hwan pursed her lips. Not bad. Dad will probably like it. Chin Mo smiled. He was referring to Shunzi. Hee-Hwan didn't say anything more. Of course, Chin Mo picked up a cashmere scarf for Su Ching. It was suitable for the season, so Hee-Hwan didn't say anything. Later, he saw a gray flower foundation and looked at Hee-Hwan. He took it and put it on her. It was very suitable, so they paid for it together. Hee-Hwan also left with the scarf. It was indeed very warm. It was almost 7:00 when they arrived at the He family's house. Su Ching called halfway. Hee-Hwan only said that she would be there in a while. She still didn't say that Chin Mo would be there. Chin Mo drove and looked at her sideways without saying anything. Chapter 44:50. As soon as Chin Mo's car drove in, the He family's elders were alarmed. They knew that Hee-Hwan was back, but it was needless to say what it meant when Chin Mo's car drove in. Thinking about how Sheng's crisis was suddenly resolved, one could imagine what kind of compromise Hee-Hwan had made. Su Ching and Kaim were old and didn't use Weibo much. Moreover, it was Lunar New Year's Eve, and Hee-Hwan was coming back, so they had been busy with dinner to celebrate. Now that Chin Mo's car drove into their house, it couldn't be clearer what it meant. As a mother, Hee-Hwan was a little angry. However, as a mother, she had to suppress her anger because she didn't want Hee-Hwan to be embarrassed. She and Kaim stood in the hall and watched as Chin Mo slowly walked over with one hand on Hee-Hwan's shoulder. Uncle Kaim sighed. After this storm, his feelings for Chin Mo had become a lot more complicated. Chin Mo and Yi Muyun were really Anlin's sons. They were both ruthless to their enemies and their families. They wouldn't stop until they achieved their goals. The He family of three had complicated feelings. Only Chin Mo acted like nothing had happened. He had a strong mentality and was very thick-skinned. When they arrived in front of Su Ching and Kaim, Chin Mo was the first to greet them as if they were his parents. It was as if they were his biological parents. Su Cheng's face froze, and Kaim felt a little uncomfortable. However, for the sake of his daughter, he could only endure it. Hee-Hwan also greeted him. Chin Mo held her hand. It'll be cold in a while. Let's go in. He let Hee-Hwan in, and it felt like he was the host. In fact, when Hee-Hwan was abroad, he often came over and had a good relationship with the He family's elders. In the hall, Chin Mo presented the gift. Su Ching smiled reservedly and said, "Sorry to let you spend so much money." How could Chin Mo not tell that Hee-Hwan was not familiar with his words? He shamelessly helped He Huan take off her coat and smiled. He Huan picked it. I'm only in charge of paying by card. Su Qing smiled awkwardly and looked at her husband. Kaim was helpless. Since things had come to this, there was nothing to argue about. He had already brought her back, so he couldn't just kick her out. He wasn't selling his daughter for glory, but He Huan had her own reasons for doing so. The atmosphere eased a little. Su Qing had no choice but to say that it was time to eat. Just then, a sound came from outside. As if something had pierced through the sky, the group of people walked towards the door and saw a helicopter slowly landing on the lawn in front of the villa. Because it was a top-notch mansion, there would be a landing point. The helicopter landed, and a tall man came down with something small in his arms. He Huan immediately covered her mouth. It was Yi Huan. The surprise came quickly. She thought that she wouldn't be able to see Yi Huan for a while. When Yi Huan saw Yi Huan, her plump body immediately struggled. Her little feet landed on the ground, and she ran over with all her might. Mama! Yi Huan was anxious, afraid that she would fall. Little Yi Huan really fell. Her plump body fell in the snow, and it looked indescribably cute and funny. Yi Huan was so distressed that she wanted to run over. Qin Emo held her back. I'll carry her over. You're not wearing your coat. Chapter 44-51. The little person's body was soft and warm. Yi Huan held it in her arms and wanted to cry. She kissed Yi Huan's soft hair. It smelled nice. It had been a long time since she had hugged her. Perhaps sensing her mother's mood, Yi Huan stayed still and let Yi Huan kiss her. After Yi Huan hugged and kissed her for a while, Yi Huan looked at Qin Emo eagerly, meaning that she wanted her father to kiss her too. Qin Emo hugged her and kissed her soft little face. He smiled and said, "It's time to eat. Grandma made Yi Huan's favorite food." After he said that, Su Cheng's expression changed slightly. She looked at Qin Emo and felt that Qin Emo was very thoughtful. Nothing could escape his eyes. Qin Emo just smiled and carried little Yi Huan to the dining table. Because there was a sweetheart like Yi Huan, the atmosphere at the dining table was much better. Yi Huan's mood was also much better, and there was a faint smile on her face. Su Cheng sighed in her heart and looked at Kaim again. Kaim sighed and was speechless for a while. After dinner, Yi Huan left Yi Huan to Qin Emo to take care of. She went to the tea room with Su Cheng to have a cup of flower tea. After that, she had to go back with Qin Emo. When there were only the mother and daughter in the room, some things could be said directly. Su Cheng thought for a while and asked in a low voice, "Yi Huan, have you really thought it through? Isn't it too much to pay for the rest of your father's and my lives?" She added, "I've told you before, simple food is good too." Yi Huan kept her head down and gently stirred the tea in her cup. After a long time, she picked it up and took a sip. Then she frowned and said, "It's so bitter." She added another sugar. Su Cheng couldn't help but say, "You put a lot in." "But I can't." Yi Huan looked up at her mother. "I can't let you and Dad be miserable because of me. I don't want to see Yi Huan all the time. She is my daughter, and I love her like you love me. So, Mom, you will understand me, right?" Su Cheng still sighed. "I just don't want you to feel wronged." "I won't feel wronged if it's worth it." Yi Huan smiled and put 2 more sweets in. "Just eat something sweet. Now, Qin Emo treats me very well." Su Cheng thought of how Qin Emo took care of Yi Huan during the dinner. Yi Huan was even better than before. It was just that this kind of kindness made Su Qing very uneasy. In her eyes, it was the kind of entanglement that would only end when she died. This love was too strong, and Qin Mo was so strong that she had no choice but to be Su Cheng's love. Su Cheng looked at the child she raised. Although she looked weak, she had borne too much. In the end, Su Cheng couldn't help but ask, "You came back to Qin Mo just for us and for Yi Huan. Don't you have any feelings for Qin Mo?" After she asked, Yi Huan seemed a little surprised. Then, she smiled faintly. "Mom, why do you ask? I thought you knew." Su Cheng was stunned for a moment. Then, she thought of something and sighed softly. "Why do you make things difficult for yourself?" At this moment, Qin Mo happened to walk over. Separated by a thin door, he heard their conversation. Although Yi Huan didn't answer directly, it was enough to express her feelings. Qin Mo's face was gloomy. He stood for a long time before he gently knocked on the door. Chapter 44-52. However, when the door opened, Qin Mo already had a gentle smile on his face. "It's getting late and Yi Huan is a little sleepy. Yi Huan, we should go back. We'll come back another day." Yi Huan was stunned. She looked at Su Qing and said, "Mom, I'll go back first. I'll come back on the 30th. Su Qing stood up. "It's getting late. You should go back." She hugged Yi Huan reluctantly and said, "Come back to visit me and your dad when you're free. We miss you, and we're worried." This worry was obviously meant for Qin Mo to hear. What had happened in the past had happened and no one brought it up. If they brought it up, it would hurt. They couldn't stay in the same house anymore. But as a mother, she felt that she owed Yi Huan. As parents, they should protect their children. But in the end, Yi Huan did it for them. Su Cheng was very sad. Yi Huan comforted her and went downstairs with Qin Mo. Little Yi Huan was already fully dressed. Only her round eyes were exposed. She looked very cute. Qin Mo took Yi Huan's coat and helped her put it on, then wrapped a scarf around her neck. He carried Yi Huan with one hand and placed the other on Yi Huan's shoulder. He turned around to bid farewell to his parents, looking very elegant and graceful. Su Qing watched them leave and get in the car. Then, she leaned her head on Kim's shoulder and murmured, "I know women want to marry a husband like Qin Mo. But I'm still worried. Shuheng. Yi Huan has changed. She doesn't like to smile anymore. She wasn't like this before. Don't you think her appearance has changed?" Kim's heart was heavy. He looked down at his wife and touched her. "Yi Huan is an adult. I believe she will be fine." Su Qing closed her eyes. "I hope so." In the snowy night, Qin Mo drove. It was very warm inside. Outside the car, it started to snow gently. Yi Huan happily leaned against the window and said in a crisp voice, "Daddy, it's snowing again." Qin Mo smiled slightly. "Yes, it's snowing again. Tomorrow you can build a snowman with Mom in the villa. Are you happy?" Yi Huan murmured that she was happy, and then she was not in the mood to talk to him anymore. She looked at the elves floating in the dark through the window. After a while, she called Yi Huan excitedly, "Mom, can we really make a snowman tomorrow? I really don't have to go to school, I don't have to wake up at 6 o'clock to brush my teeth, and I really don't have to wash my own clothes." The little fellow's unintentional words almost made Yi Huan cry. His heart ached terribly. She looked at Qin Mo, who was sitting in front of her. Qin Mo seemed to know what she was thinking. He coughed softly and said, Yi Huan is the same as the children of the Yi family. She went to a military school, which can cultivate her independence. Yi Huan doesn't need it. Yi Huan gritted her teeth and said angrily. Qin Mo didn't say anything. After a long while, he suddenly said in a low voice, she needs it. Yi Huan was stunned. Qin Mo continued, I'll explain this to you in the future. It was true that she didn't need it in the past, but it was different now. Yi Huan's body was no longer suitable for bearing another child, so Yi Huan had to be the heir of King Entertainment, whether Yi Huan was willing or not. Yi Huan was stunned for a while. She seemed to realize something and didn't speak again. Chapter 44-53. Qin Mo didn't say anything and just drove. It was snowing on the night of the Little New Year. His wife and child were sitting in the back of his car, and that was enough. An hour later, the car stopped in front of the villa. It was a villa under Qin Mo's name. He stopped the car and paused for a moment. We're home. When he unfastened the seatbelt, little Yi Huan was still leaning against the window and looking at the snow outside while Yi Huan was clenching her fists tightly. Qin Mo knew what she was thinking about, but he didn't point it out and just said softly, put on your coat. Yi Huan came back to her senses and pursed her lips before putting on her coat. There was also Yi Huan's coat. Qin Mo got out of the car first and opened the door for them. When the door opened, a gust of cold wind blew in. Yi Huan buried her little face in her father's arms, looking especially delicate. Yi Huan's heart ached even more when she looked at this. This little Yi Huan was only 6 years old when she was asked to undergo closed-door training. She was a little angry, both at Qin Mo and at herself. She followed him out of the car and walked towards the villa. The gentle snowflakes drifted down and landed on his face. It was ice-cold, and it also calmed him down. Yi Huan raised her little face from Qin Mo's arms and looked at the fine snow. She exclaimed, what a great snow. Her legs kicked a few times as if she wanted to get down, but Qin Mo patted her. We'll play tomorrow. Yi Huan obediently lay on her father's shoulder and looked at the fine snow curiously. Under the light, it danced. When they reached the living room, it was warm. The servants came over to help take care of Yi Huan, but Qin Mo said it was fine and carried Yi Huan to the master bedroom upstairs. Yi Huan followed along. The servants looked up at their master and felt that there was something wrong between Sir and Madam. It was even warmer in the master bedroom upstairs. Yi Huan took off her coat. She was only wearing a sweater and a small skirt. She ran to the floor-to-ceiling window to look at the snow. She looked very cute lying there. Qin Mo walked over and caught her. It's getting late. It's time for bed. Dad, I still want to watch for a while. Yi Huan said coquettishly. Afraid that he would not agree, she kissed his face and kissed him again. Qin Mo looked at her and coughed softly after a long time. Half an hour. Yi Huan nodded vigorously. Children were easily attracted. While she was watching the snow, Yi Huan came in to tell Qin Mo what they hadn't finished talking about in the car. Qin Mo took off his coat and pondered for a moment. Let's go to the study. This bedroom came with a study. Before entering the study, Qin Mo poured a cup of warm milk for Yi Huan and stuffed it into her little hands to warm them up. Yi Huan looked at them silently. She had always known that Qin Mo was good at taking care of children and doted on Yi Huan. But if he doted on her so much, why did he send her to such a place? She couldn't understand. So when they were alone in the study, she asked him softly, Qin Mo, isn't it good for Yi Huan to grow up peacefully? You can, let Chin Chin or Chin Mu's child be the heir. Chin Mo sat on the sofa and looked at He Huan. He smiled lightly. Do you think I have a choice? If I had a choice, I wouldn't be sitting on the top floor of King Entertainment. That position originally belonged to my elder brother. He ran to the Tang family when he was 10 and I had no choice but to take it. Because other than Yimuyun, I am the most powerful in the Qin family. He Huan, do you still not understand? He Huan's face was a little pale. I don't understand. Actually, she understood in her heart, but she just didn't want to believe in his decision. Qin Mo lowered his eyes. We originally had the chance to have another child, but He Huan, I don't want to take the risk. Qin Chen said it's best if you don't get pregnant, so we don't want children. And Yi Huan is destined to be the heir of King Entertainment. This can't be changed. He Huan looked at him coldly. What do you want her to become? A working machine. Like Qin Chen, a top talent in the industry, Qin Mo said softly. He Huan's entire body was cold. She stared at him and after a long time, she clenched her fists. Yi Huan is also my child. I have the right to decide what her future is like. Yi Huan belongs to the Qin family. Qin Mo's voice was a little cold. He Huan, be rational. This isn't something I can decide or control. He Huan's face turned even paler. She said quickly, then you can have a child with another woman. I can't have a child, right? As soon as she said that, the air seemed to freeze. Qin Mo looked at her quietly. After a long time, he asked her, say that again. He Huan sat opposite him. Her fragile body was full of energy. Qin Mo, you can have a child with another woman. Yi Huan is my child. I won't let her be manipulated by you. After saying that, she immediately got up and ran to the door of the study. But her body was really too fragile. After a few steps, he caught up with her when she grabbed the doorknob. Qin Mo pressed against her and put one hand on the back of her hand. His voice rang beside her ear. He Huan, you don't have a heart. Is it me who doesn't, or you? He Huan closed her eyes. Are you taking revenge on me by treating Yi Huan like this? She suddenly turned around from his arms and looked at him. Taking revenge on me for not loving you anymore. Qin Mo's face suddenly became very ugly. He pinched her chin and took a step forward, forcing her between him and the door until He Huan had no way out. His Adam's apple bobbed, showing his great patience at that moment. He wanted to strangle her with his own hands. He Huan's body trembled. After a long time, he only said, He Huan, you really dare to say that. Chapter 44-54. After Qin Mo left, He Huan stood there alone for a long time. The heating in the house was good, but her heart was still cold, from the bottom of her heart all the way to the soles of her feet. At this moment, she didn't want to face Qin Mo, nor could she face Yi Huan. She felt like a failure. She was Yi Huan's mother. She couldn't even protect her own child. Yi Huan closed her eyes, feeling an indescribable pain in her heart. She held on to the door handle for a long time before she calmed herself down. Then, she walked slowly to the sofa. She sat there, and then felt that she needed to do something, so she went to the wine cabinet and pulled out a bottle of red wine. She deliberately made herself drunk, as if she had drunk half the bottle of red wine. It was still night. It was still snowing. Tonight was no different from the past. He Huan held the crystal goblet, feeling lonely for the first time. She couldn't protect herself, and she couldn't protect Yi Huan. She couldn't protect anything. She drank a little too much and started crying. For the first time, she was full of confusion about life, and didn't know how she should go on. Then, after some time, Chun Mo opened the door and came in. There was a hint of anger on his face, but if one didn't look closely, one wouldn't notice it. Chi Mo was also a little surprised. His gaze landed on the bottle of red wine on the coffee table. It looked like half the bottle had been drunk, and Huan was leaning on the sofa, a little tipsy. Her palm-sized face was leaning on the sofa, her red lips slightly open. Her porcelain skin was fair, and her long and dense eyelashes were like two little fans. Actually, Chi Mo knew that Huan had been like this when she was young, but when she grew up, she was too wild and tanned. But now, she had returned to her old self. But no matter what she looked like, he hoped that she could be happy. Huan was half drunk and half sober. She looked at him with her starry eyes, and her voice sounded dreamy. Chi Mo, let's have another child, okay? He was originally angry, but now his heart softened. He sat down beside her and said in a low voice, "For Huan." Huan rested her head on his leg. She looked very soft. She said yes. Then she raised her head and wanted to kiss him. Chi Mo lowered his head and kissed her. He didn't say yes or no, but he didn't reject her. At dawn, Huan woke up and realized that she was sleeping on the sofa in the study. The sofa was open, and she was covered with a blanket. Her pajamas were Chi Mo's shirt. Thinking of last night, she immediately sat up. Then, she saw in the trash can, she scratched her hair and curled up her body silently. She just stared blankly and did not make a sound. Chi Mo came in from the master bedroom. There was a hint of joy in his indifferent expression. Men were all like this. They were usually in a good mood after the event. Huan heard his footsteps and looked up at him. He was probably not going to work, so he was wearing a pair of casual gray pants and a black turtleneck sweater. It looked comfortable and nice. Chi Mo came over and bent down to kiss her. His voice was also a little low. "What are you thinking about?" Huan's gaze landed on the trash can at the side. He understood and replied bitterly, "Chen said that it's best if you don't get pregnant." Huan looked down for a long time before saying softly, "But I want to give it a try." Chi Mo grabbed her shoulder and said in a deep voice, "Give birth to a boy." And then Huan did not say anything. He stared at her for a long time before smirking. "Huan, don't even think about it. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.